Alexander the Great, the young king who conquered the world. Intro, the legend begins. More than 2,000 years ago, a young king set out with an army that would change the course of history. His name was Alexander of Macedon. Before he turned 30, Alexander had conquered one of the greatest empires the ancient world had ever known, defeated powerful kings, crossed deserts and mountains, and marched thousands of miles into unknown lands. He became known as Alexander the Great. But what made this young king so extraordinary? Was it his military genius, his courage, his ambition, or his ability to inspire thousands of soldiers to follow him into the impossible? This is the story of Alexander the Great, the young warrior who dreamed of conquering the known world. Chapter 1, The Prince of Macedon. Alexander was born in 356 BC in the Kingdom of Macedon, in northern Greece. His father was King Philip II, one of the most powerful rulers of the ancient Greek world. Philip transformed Macedon into a highly organized military power. He created the famous Macedonian phalanx and built an army capable of defeating much larger forces. Alexander grew up surrounded by war, politics, and ambition. But his education was not limited to military training. His father wanted him to become a great ruler, so Alexander was educated by one of history's greatest philosophers, Aristotle. Aristotle taught him philosophy, science, literature, medicine, and politics. Alexander became fascinated by the stories of heroes, especially Achilles from Homer's Iliad. He wanted more than a comfortable royal life. He wanted glory. He wanted to become a legend. Chapter 2, A King at Just 20. In 336 BC, Alexander's life changed forever. His father, Philip II, was assassinated. Alexander was only 20 years old. Many believed the young king would not survive. Enemies inside and outside Macedon saw an opportunity to challenge him. But Alexander acted quickly. He secured his position as king and crushed rebellions that threatened his rule. Instead of waiting for his enemies to attack, Alexander decided to continue his father's greatest ambition: the invasion of the Persian Empire. At the time, the Persian Empire was enormous. It controlled vast territories across Asia and was ruled by King Darius III. Persia was wealthy, powerful, and had armies far larger than Alexander's. Yet Alexander was not afraid. In 334 BC, he crossed the Hellespont with roughly 40,000 soldiers. He was now entering Asia. And his conquest had begun. Chapter 3, The First Great Victories. Alexander's first major battle against the Persian army came at the Battle of the Granicus River. The Persian forces were waiting for him. Alexander personally led his cavalry into the attack. The battle was brutal, but Alexander's army won. This victory opened much of Asia Minor to Macedonian control. City after city surrendered. Alexander continued southward, defeating Persian forces and capturing strategic territories. But his greatest challenge was still ahead. In 333 BC, Alexander faced King Darius III himself at the Battle of Issus. Darius commanded a massive army. Alexander's forces were heavily outnumbered. Yet Alexander identified a weakness in the Persian formation. He personally led a cavalry charge toward the Persian command. The attack created chaos. Darius fled the battlefield. The Persian army collapsed. Alexander had defeated the king of the largest empire in the ancient world. But instead of chasing Darius immediately, Alexander continued his campaign. He captured major cities including Tyre, after a remarkable siege that lasted months. Then he entered Egypt. Chapter 4, A Pharaoh and a New City. When Alexander arrived in Egypt, many Egyptians welcomed him as a liberator from Persian rule. He was crowned as pharaoh. And during his time in Egypt, Alexander founded one of the most famous cities in history. Alexandria. Located near the Mediterranean coast, Alexandria would eventually become a center of learning, science, culture, and trade. Alexander then traveled to the Oracle of Amun at Siwa. According to ancient accounts, the priests recognized him as a divine son of Amun. Whether Alexander truly believed he was descended from the gods is uncertain. But one thing was clear. His confidence was growing. He no longer seemed satisfied with simply defeating Persia. He wanted to conquer the entire empire. Chapter 5, The Fall of Darius. In 331 BC, Alexander and Darius met again. This time, at Gaugamela. Darius had prepared carefully. The Persian army was enormous. Alexander's army was smaller, but extremely disciplined. The battlefield was carefully chosen to give the Persian forces an advantage. Darius believed he could finally destroy Alexander. But Alexander had another plan. He slowly moved his forces to one side of the battlefield, forcing the Persian army to spread out. Then, at the perfect moment, Alexander launched a powerful cavalry attack toward Darius. The Persian king panicked and fled. Once again, his army collapsed. The victory at Gaugamela was decisive. Alexander entered the Persian royal capitals of Babylon, Susa, and eventually Persepolis. The Persian Empire was effectively defeated. But Alexander wasn't finished. Chapter 6, Into the Unknown. Alexander continued east. He crossed enormous distances through modern-day Iran and Central Asia. The further he traveled, the harder the campaign became. His soldiers faced extreme heat, mountains, deserts, unfamiliar enemies, and long supply lines. Alexander fought fierce resistance from local rulers. But he continued pushing forward. He even married Roxana, a noblewoman from Central Asia. His empire was becoming enormous. But Alexander's ambitions were becoming even greater. Eventually, he reached the borders of India. There, he faced one of the most memorable battles of his entire career. Chapter 7, The Battle of the Hydaspes. In 326 BC, Alexander faced King Porus near the Hydaspes River, in the region of modern-day Pakistan. Porus had something Alexander's army had never faced on such a scale. War elephants. The massive animals terrified many soldiers and could crush infantry formations. Alexander needed a strategy. He crossed the river during a storm and attacked from an unexpected direction. The battle was fierce. Alexander eventually defeated Porus, but according to ancient accounts, Alexander was impressed by the Indian king's courage. After capturing him, Alexander reportedly asked how he wished to be treated. Porus answered, "Like a king." Alexander respected his bravery. Instead of humiliating him, Alexander allowed Porus to continue ruling his territory under Macedonian authority. It was another example of Alexander's ability to turn defeated enemies into allies. Chapter 8, When the Army Said No. After years of fighting, Alexander wanted to continue deeper into India. But his soldiers had reached their limit. They had been away from home for years. They had crossed mountains, deserts, and rivers. They had fought countless battles. And now they refused to go farther. Alexander was furious. He wanted to continue toward the eastern edge of the known world. But eventually, he had to accept their decision. His army began the long journey back west. The campaign that had started as a mission to conquer Persia had transformed into one of the largest military expeditions of the ancient world. Alexander had conquered territories stretching from Greece to parts of India. But the journey home would be devastating. Chapter 9, The Final Days. Alexander returned to Babylon in 323 BC. He was only 32 years old. His empire stretched across an enormous part of the ancient world. But Alexander's dreams were not over. He was reportedly planning new campaigns, possibly into Arabia and beyond. Then, suddenly, Alexander became seriously ill. His condition worsened over several days. His soldiers gathered outside his chambers, wanting to see their king one last time. According to ancient accounts, Alexander was too weak to speak. But he was able to acknowledge his soldiers as they passed by. In June 323 BC, Alexander died. He was only 32 years old. The exact cause of his death remains debated. Possible explanations have included disease, infection, poisoning, or other medical causes. But whatever the cause, one of history's most extraordinary lives had come to an end. Conclusion, The Legacy of Alexander. Alexander the Great conquered an empire that had once seemed almost impossible to defeat. He won battle after battle. He founded cities. He connected cultures across enormous distances. Greek language, art, philosophy, and political ideas spread throughout many parts of the territories he conquered. This period became known as the Hellenistic Age. But Alexander's empire did not survive him for long. He left behind no adult heir capable of immediately controlling such a vast territory. His generals fought among themselves, and the empire eventually broke into several powerful kingdoms. Yet Alexander's name survived. Generals studied his tactics. Kings admired his ambition. Writers turned his life into legend. And historians continued to debate the same question. What could Alexander have achieved if he had lived longer? He became king at 20. He conquered the Persian Empire before 30. He marched thousands of miles across the ancient world. And he died at just 32. Alexander the Great was not simply a conqueror. He was a symbol of ambition, courage, military genius, and the limitless desire to achieve the impossible. His empire disappeared. His armies eventually faded into history. But his legend survived for more than 2,000 years. Alexander the Great, the young king who set out to conquer the world, and became one of history's most unforgettable figures.